Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host, Maqbool, with you at PTV World. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at two important topics. The first is in reference to what is going on in the country in terms of our relationship in the international community, and particularly also the Chief of Army Staff's visit to Washington, where he's, of course, met with a number of the officials there, and he's also met with his counterparts, including the commander of the U.S. Central Command, the commander of Centcom, and a number of issues, including security cooperation, were discussed, particularly in terms of how cooperation can exist on regional security concerns, including, of course, that of Pakistan as well, which comprise of counter-terrorist activities within the country and in the region as well. And of course, issues such as Afghanistan also came under discussion. And this is something that has come amid what the Washington Post has also reported are perhaps slightly unsettled relations between the U.S. and Pakistan, particularly over the Afghanistan issue and the policy of the illegal foreign nationals residing in the country, of course, that of Afghan nationality as well. At the same time, we also know that during his entire visit, the Chief of Army Staff also met with the leadership of the Pentagon as well and discussed various important aspects of collaboration, particularly with regards to issues such as that of the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, a topic that also came under discussion with his meeting with the UN Secretary General, in which the new ruling by the Indian Supreme Court also was spoken about, with the COAS raising concerns of what is going on and how this is against the UN Security Council resolutions and in complete violation of international norms. And also included in the conversation was the issue of Gaza and Palestine, which was further reiterated by the Chief of Army Staff to put forward the stance, and he urged the UN Secretary General to also push the international community and the UN body as a platform to move forward with ending the atrocities that are going on in Palestine and in particularly the Gaza Strip and the genocide that is continuing, unfortunately. We're going to be talking about these important aspects of the relation and, of course, other dynamics with regards to security cooperation, what kinds of movement and measures we can expect, particularly, of course, in terms of political, economic and security concerns that Pakistan has. And that, of course, with regards to the statement that has also been made by the U.S. Or regarding this particular visit, claiming that Pakistan is a very important non-NATO ally of the U.S. and is a NATO partner. And this is something that they're keenly looking forward to, and particularly in terms of the visit by the Chief Army Staff, there are various areas of mutual cooperation that were discussed. So we're going to be taking a look at all of that and try and understand what impact will this particular visit have and how will that translate into tangible cooperation, particularly in terms of security. Our next segment is also going to be taking a look at the developing dynamics in the country in light of the upcoming elections of February 8th. And a lot of course, discussions are being carried forward with regards to different political parties and their involvement in the measures taken in this regard, and whether or not we're going to be moving forward with the elections as per the schedule, even though it has been reiterated so many times, and the schedule now has also been given by the ECP. Of course, there's also discussion now that is moving ahead with the Chief Election Commissioner, with a number of reports coming in, and also a number of organizations, including the Pakistan Bar Council and other legal organizations, that have raised objections over whether or not free, fair and transparent elections will be possible under the Chief Election Commissioner, and how certain measures taken by the ECP, including that of delimitations and procedures prior to the elections, was something that they have concerns about, and that they think is pointing towards discrepancies, and so raising concerns of whether or not they're going to be seeing a free and fair elections under this leadership. So we're going to be taking a look at that as well, and what it will mean for the country, and especially in terms of the election schedule. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analysts Farrukh, Pitafi and Raja Faisal. We've also been joined online by Mr. Anwar Iqbal, who's a senior journalist, and Dr. Ishtiaq, Ahmad, foreign affairs expert. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. Let me start with you, Dr. Ishtiaq. The concern around what is going on, of course, particularly in terms of Pakistan's relationship with other countries, is extremely important. And we have seen that the Chief of Army Staff has also played a huge role with regards to improving our ties with different countries, and especially that of the U.S. And given the current political and economic concerns that Pakistan has, and also our security concerns, this particular visit, of course, holds a lot of importance, and a wide variety of people have met the Chief of Army Staff, and a number of issues have been discussed discussed that comprise political ones as well, in terms of regional security cooperation as well, and of course other concerns in terms of issues such as Kashmir and Palestine. So a number of these aspects have been discussed, and I'm sure this has been done previously as well. But what do you see in terms of this particular visit and the impact that that's going to have, and the kind of value addition that we can hope for?
Well, Army Chief General Asim Munir's visit is very crucial. It is taking place at a very important juncture. As you know that throughout our history, there have been ups and downs in US-Pakistani relationship. But the fact is that at least from in the perspective of military to military ties, there has been consistency. The checkered past obviously brings up some critical, moments also, and there are aspects where Pakistanis are really bitter about. Just as after the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, there has been a period of relative, cooling down of relations. And I think with this visit, because it occurs at a time when there are a host of challenges, but also from the perspective of Pakistan's foreign policy, there are opportunities also on the horizon. Namely, in my opinion, is the issue of terrorism from across the frontiers in Afghanistan. And on the Eastern Front, India's behavior, not just vis-a-vis the international dispute of Kashmir, but also internationally in terms of its alleged involvement in terrorist assassinations in Canada and also elsewhere in the Western world. And I think with these challenges, Pakistan should try to, explain the regional situation, the involvement of some actors in the region, and their involvement certainly is not in accordance with the norms of behavior according to international law.
Right, absolutely. Faisal, we also see, of course, that when we take a look at this particular visit, a major concern that was also shared was in terms of security cooperation, and of course, in ways that both the countries and the defense cooperation on both sides can actually collaborate together, including, of course, trainings that can be conducted or joint operations, exercises that can be conducted as well. And so I want to understand the context of the kind of security concerns we have today within Pakistan and, of course, across the border from Afghanistan as well. How will then this cooperation unfold in terms of what we see on ground? Can there really be a cooperation by the US and Pakistan defense sides, particularly in relationship with Afghanistan?
Yes, Anna, obviously, if we look at Pakistan's concerns related to our western border, of course, Afghanistan, I'm talking about the bordering Afghanistan provinces. Of course, they have been a serious problem for Pakistan in recent past. And if we obviously talk about the history of Afghanistan, twice, Afghanistan, there was turbulence in Afghanistan. Obviously, I'm talking about the Soviet era as well, and how Soviet, obviously, they were ousted from there. And of course, America had a huge role at that time to play in Afghanistan. And with the help of Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, they did it successfully. At that time, of course, Soviets wanted access to the warm waters of the Arabian Sea, which did not, they couldn't go through to that. But what I'm trying to say is, at that time, of course, the Americans, they left the region without, any sort of further help to Pakistan as well as the Afghanistan. At that time it was much needed, and they left it for Pakistan to settle. And then later on we saw that the problems originated for the whole world from within Afghanistan. And now once again we are on the same same corridor, in which of course we are seeing that Americans, they left Afghanistan once more, and of course Pakistan is facing the problems right now. And I think it was necessary for Chief of the Army Staff and of course Pakistan to reiterate the facts that If this time around America leaves it like this, then of course the problems would of course escalate in coming future. This particular visit was very important when it comes to obviously Pakistan's, Pakistan's cooperation with America. Both of the countries, they have been allied since the day one. When it comes to Afghanistan, we have a long standing contribution towards maintaining peace in this region. And of course, if we talk about both of the countries having defense relations, of course the defense products of America, they are used by Pakistan. And of course this visit, in this visit, of course, it's been reiterated and highlighted that of course, Pakistan has been non-NATO ally, an ally for the US in the region, as well as, of course, Pakistan always stood for the right. And of course, we have been seeing that the contributions from Pakistan, they have already been extended. And now when Pakistan needs help from the Western countries in terms of sorting out the problems, especially related to terrorism originating from Afghanistan, within Afghanistan, then of course world must stand with Pakistan as well. The war and terror might have ended for the world, but when it comes to Pakistan, of course, we're still fighting for it.
Right, sure, but that still doesn't answer my question of exactly what sort of cooperation will we actually see. But I'll come back to that, and I'll also take in Mr. Anwar Iqbal, who's joined us on telephone line. Thank you very much for joining us and being a part of the discussion. And please, if you can also update us with regards to your own perspective as to how you saw the entire visit by the Chief of Army Staff, and what sort of developments took place, particularly in terms of the scale at which these discussions were held, how much importance was given to them by the US side as well, by the US media and journalists, and what do you think has been the outcome of this visit, and whether or not it was a substantial development in the US? Anwar Saab, are you with me?
Yes, I am. Sorry, I couldn't hear your question though. Can you repeat yourself? What did you ask?
Right. Right. My question is, when you take a look at the Chief of Army Staff's visit to the US, of course, a number of meetings have been held and important discussions have been held as well. But I'd like your perspective in terms of how this particular visit was viewed and treated by the US as well, in terms of not just the leadership, but also in terms of the people, the media, and what you think has been the overall outcome or impact that this visit has had.
Well, I mean, as far as the U.S. administration is concerned, they have been very welcoming. The visit was discussed in news briefings at the Pentagon as well as the State Department, and at both these places, the spokespersons underlying Pakistan's importance as a key non-NATO ally, as a major non-NATO ally, NATO partner, and the need for staying engaged with Pakistan, particularly with reference to security challenges in our region. As the media, of course, is a different thing. The U.S. media does not show much interest in visits by foreign military leaders. Even you see, I mean, there are prime ministers and presidents from other nations that keep coming to Washington. You hardly see anything in the New York Times or the Washington Post. There are some specialized magazines and media outlets that do take interest, like the Foreign Policy magazine did a story on the visit of the Army Chief. There are some other outlets also that mentioned that he was here, that he was meeting American military and civilian leaders, and that Pakistan was an important ally. But overall, I think it was a successful visit. Pakistan got what it wanted. I think what Pakistan wanted was an understanding that the United States still considers Pakistan an important ally, and that the current situation in Pakistan and the situation around the country's borders concern the United States as well. That they trusted the current Pakistani administration or the establishment is taking, and that they want the administration and the establishment to continue those steps. So I think that message has been conveyed and received, and I think overall it was a successful visit.
All right. There was a report by the Washington-based Foreign Policy magazine that talked about the relationship that the U.S. and Pakistan have currently, and a number of issues that were raised, which have added to perhaps an unsettling environment at the moment. What do you think about that post, and what sort of impact would that have created in light of how generally the perception is in terms of relationship between Pakistan and the U.S.?
I actually did refer to that article, didn't I? I mean, yes, there was a report by Michael Kugelman on in Foreign Policy magazine on the general visit, and it was a positive report. It actually discussed U.S.-Pakistan relations and how things are changing, and how there is a space for more engagement with Pakistan. And that is how it's seen. I mean, there is a realization in Washington that Pakistan is not a country that can be abandoned or left behind, that the United States needs to stay engaged in Pakistan, and they do want to carry forward the relationship. But as I said, that we are actually when we sort of talk about these things, we we use the perspective that we have, our own perspective, which is in Pakistan. Obviously, the activities of military leaders are read very carefully. They are given a lot of importance and everything. But here in America, the American media does not even cover the activities of its own military leaders. They will not see in New York Times or the Washington Post stories about what the U.S. Defense Secretary is doing, about the U.S. Army.
I understand that. What I also want to understand is whether or not this analysis of how the relationship is something that you agree with, and if there is some sort of unsettlement between the two countries. Do you think that that sort of also reflected upon the meetings that were held? What sort of environment was there with the meetings then?
I think that it's cordial. There is a desire in Washington to continue this relationship. There is a realization of Pakistan's importance, and I think there was a time, particularly in the early days of the Trump administration, when Washington was trying to distance itself from Pakistan, and it seemed as if the U.S. relationship with India was going to completely dominate U.S. perspective on our region. That is changing. Pakistan is being recognized as a country which is important, and on its own, Pakistan's effort to actually convey to the United States and other world powers that they should not really link Pakistan always with India or with Afghanistan, but they should see it as a country which has its own significance. And that effort is paying off, and we are being recognized as an important country in a sensitive region.
Right. Farrukh, when we take a look at the current situation then in terms of what's happening, I know we got the statement from the US claiming that Pakistan is a very important non-NATO ally and a NATO partner. Yeah. And of course, a number of issues were discussed of a lot of concern to Pakistan as well. And it's important that our Chief of Army Staff visited and met with the leadership there. But I also want to understand whether or not all of these measures and developments actually signify and reflect the cooperation level that exists between the two countries, not just in terms of security, but also political and economic measures. How will we translate such meetings and statements into actual measures and action?
Right, Sana, I'm happy to report that even before this visit, in the past 1 year, Pakistan and the US have actually worked together, especially in terms of investment in Pakistan's social sector. And that continues unabated. I think that is growing very fast. Simultaneously, it is also important to remember that our Fulbright program perhaps is the biggest program in the world. Having said that, let me come back to the Army Chief's visit because it is important in Pakistan's policy circles. An Army Chief's visit to various countries, and I'm going to name them, is thought to be a rite of passage. The first, of course, is the Arab countries, then China, and finally the US. But that is not to say that the predecessor of the current Army Chief did not have a tough time in actually going on the last leg, that is US visit, and it took him quite some time to be invited and when he went there. Now, we have to look at, in order to understand the success of the visit, we have to look at who went to the US right now. It is, unlike his predecessor, the current army chief is known as a straight arrow in the Washington circles. He is also known as a no-nonsense commander who knows what he wants and he is focusing on that. So that actually sort of clarifies a lot of things. And then there are two contexts that are quite intriguing right now. One, Afghanistan, actually three contexts. One, Afghanistan that has been mentioned, in which we kept on cooperating even when we were constantly being blamed, right? Especially when it came to withdrawal of forces. At that time also, Pakistan's cooperation was pivotal. Having said that, after that also, one context is Imran Khan's government and whatever drama that unfolded in Pakistan regarding the US. So in the US, it is also known that Pakistan had to pay a price for this relationship. And then, thanks to Narendra Modi's government, against whom there is an India fatigue setting in Washington. And we saw that only a few days ago, when there was a briefing given by intelligence operatives to lawmakers, US lawmakers of Indian origin, regarding this assassination attempt of Punu, that Sikh leader. After that, all of them, and some of them card-carrying supporters of India, actually came out and said, India, you have to cooperate if you want this relationship to be on track. So with that kind of context and the difficulties that India is posing in every day, because of that, perhaps things have clarified in Washington. Of course, our good friend Anwar Iqbal Saab has ear to the ground there, and he will be able to tell you more. But my understanding is that Pakistan is building on that relationship, and there was a time, Sana, when we was thought to be part of the problem. Now we are not being seen as part of the problem. Yes, we still have to work to prove that we are part of the solution, but I think we are moving in that direction.
All right. Dr. Ishtiaq, we also know that the Chief of Army Staff has met with the UN Secretary General, and he raised issues including that of Kashmir and Palestine. I'll take each one separately, and starting with the issue of Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Of course, in light of the recent ruling by the Indian Supreme Court, it's all the more important to talk about this. And of course, this was decided by the caretaker setup as well. And the caretaker foreign minister also claimed that we're going to be taking this a lot more seriously, and we're going to put forward to the international community and going to take action against it. But what we've seen previously also since 2019 is that there hasn't really been any action taken by the international community. Of course, the UN Secretary General is heading the United Nations, and the UN Security Council resolutions are being violated. What sort of measures can be taken by him, and whether or not the Chief of Army Staff visiting him personally and reiterating Pakistan's stance will make any difference in his actions taken as in his role as the UN chief?
Sana, in normal circumstances, the army chief visiting America would not meet the UN Secretary General. And I think, given the tremendous importance that military enjoys in terms of public policy and national security issues inside Pakistan, it is extremely important for the Pakistani military leadership that in its interaction with the United States, which is one of the superpowers in the world, and the United Nations, which is the main organization for global peace and security, it is extremely important to explain Pakistan's perspective on the evolving situations. And that is why perhaps, because with reference to Kashmir, since 2019, India has been actually changing the very demography of the region. So when organically even the reality of the occupied area is being changed demographically, ethnic reality, religious reality. So therefore it is important to articulate Pakistan's perspective before the leader of the World Organization, whose key responsibility is to implement UN Security Council resolutions. And now we have this a bigger, tragedy that the Indian Supreme Court has stamped that illegal action that India took by not only annexing the territory but also dividing into two parts back in 2019. So Kashmir is one issue that I think it is important to raise not just before the UN Secretary General but also before the American top civil and military leaders, and that also by the Army Chief of Pakistan. And that is important, as Farrukh also pointed out, that we are at a situation where the Hindu nationalist leadership of India is actually crossing all boundaries of international norms and legality. Previously, only this region or Pakistan or the innocent people in Kashmir were its victims. Now there are communities which are critical of India, especially the Sikh community, which is fighting a just battle for their separate state in the East Punjab province of India for the past 30 plus years. They are facing targeted assassinations in Canada, in the UK, in the United States, and this is something that must concern the Western establishments. I would also like to comment on a couple of other issues. One again pertains to Afghanistan. Now, obviously, we will see, how this trip translates into actual tangible outcomes. But one area I think which is of common interest and where, in fact, the interests of all the regional and international players converge, that is the persisting problem of terrorism from Afghanistan. Of course, Pakistan's headache is TTP and obviously partly ISK also. But Americans, are still dealing with the Taliban government as far as the Islamic State of Khorasan is concerned. And I think these two organizations, coupled with Al-Qaeda and a host of other organizations which are living in Afghan safe havens, should be a common concern. And I think the tangible thing that needs to happen, it is the revival of the Coalition Support Fund for Pakistan. It doesn't make any sense that you fight a 10-year war, as Faisal pointed out, and then you leave the region. Then you fight a 20-year war, and then you leave the region in a mess and let Pakistan to deal with the consequences of your actions. And I think this is one point that is extremely important to convey with the most serious, intent by the Pakistani military leadership, at least, that there has to be a tangible, workable relationship, because if terrorism revives again in Afghanistan, spreads across the region, that it will have global consequences. And simultaneously, on our eastern frontiers, another monster is rising. And I think it is about time that we gear up our diplomatic, campaign, both military to military and normal diplomatic and political interactions.
Right, but Dr. Ishtiaq, I want to understand whether or not, when you talk about whether this should be a common concern or not, is that the case for how the US is also viewing these threats as Pakistan is? Because, of course, in light of the US troop withdrawal, a lot of what we're facing with was left for us to deal with. And is it really the US's problem right now? Are they taking a look at it like that?
Well, I will just give you one hint. I think after the Americans left in 2021, obviously they had no strategic interest in this region, and that is why Pakistan was, disappeared from the corridors of power in terms of discussions about South Asia for a couple of years. But, on the eve of Army Chief's visit to Washington, the Americans again, coming up with Pakistan as a non-NATO ally, I think this signifies that, this relationship, which has really suffered a reversal in the past 2+ years, I think it will revive, obviously, once two things happen in Pakistan. One, and in that also the Army Chief personally is involved, and the military establishment, along with the major political forces, they also sincerely wish that Pakistan's politics remains stable ahead of this major transition that we are going to see through the elections in February. And secondly, even more crucially, the economic revival, especially as long as the IMF deal is there, should smoothly lead to some kind of a tangible economic growth for Pakistan. And political stability, economic stability in Pakistan with reference to the overall American preference for South Asia is extremely important, not necessarily for the neighboring powers such as China, but also the United States, traditionally speaking.
Right. Anwar, I'd also like to question you with regards to how we're going to be moving forward with the issue of the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir in light of what has happened in the US as well against actions which have been taken against the plot that was the assassination plot against an American citizen, a Sikh who was being targeted by involvement by state authorities of India as well. And this is something that is, of course, under investigation, something previously that has happened in Canada as well. And a lot of this is being circulated as well in terms of information sharing and key security concerns. And of course, Pakistan has been pushing for the world to understand what India is doing and how there is state-sponsored terrorism by India in Pakistan. Do you think that this experience and these incidents will change or have changed the way that our stance is being heard with regards to Indian state-sponsored terrorism? Anwar Saab, are you with us? Right, I don't think he's with us anymore, but Faisal, why don't you take the same question?
Yeah, Sana, if we talk about Kashmir, Kashmir is a bone of contention between Pakistan and India. Both of these states are having nukes, and I think it is important for the world powers to, of course, recognize this problem, and this problem must be resolved. If we obviously talk about the steps which were taken by the Indians in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, of course, abrogation of 370 and 35A, they were, steps taken by them without obviously, talking to the other party, which is, of course, Pakistan and the rest of the world as well. They were not supposed to take, unilateral steps in Kashmir because Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir is a conflicting zone, and it is recognized as a conflict zone by United Nations itself. Plebiscite is the only solution.
Right, but my question is whether or not what has happened in the US and Canada is changing the way our stance has more weightage.
Yeah, our stance has more weightage because we have been, time and again telling the world that the steps which are being taken by Indian BJP government backed by RSS ideology, Hindutva ideology, of course, this is taking the region to a disaster, and whatever we have been, highlighting in past, it is being shown to the world, throughout the world now. Of course, it has happened in Canada. It was about to happen in New York. It is cooking up in London as well. And of course, Australia has problems with it. Europe is having problems with Indian ideology. So what I'm trying to say is, of course, the world is coming to terms with it, that the ideology, the extremist ideology which is popping up from India is going to be a huge trouble, not only for the region, but the whole world as well. And it needs to be buckled up right now rather than waiting for a certain time. No.
All right. Farrukh, is the US looking at these problems in a collective lens still, or is the issue such as that of the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir still a separate one for them?
Right, Sana, I think that the US approach more or less is holistic. And there has been India's diplomatic bullying that has actually caused it to stop mentioning Kashmir that often. We have seen that only a few people actually, I think Clinton, before he became president, mentioned Kashmir. Then we saw President Trump actually mentioning Kashmir. Nobody else actually publicly, while in office, did so. But that doesn't mean that the Western leaders are not aware of Kashmir or they are not sensitized to the state of affairs there. I think that all of this essentially depends on their diplomatic relationship with India. And whatever is going on in India is actually worrying a lot of people. Regarding Punu assassination attempt and what happened in Canada and what happened in UK, I have a group of security journalists that have been reporting on that beat all over the world. We have a small unofficial group. We keep on interacting. Some of them have actually worked with in close proximity of US and Western intelligence, particularly Five Eyes intelligence. So they were yesterday telling me that what we are looking at is only the tip of the iceberg. And there's much more what India has been doing, and it has been traced back to India. One by one, you are going to hear about various other incidents of the same sort. So that is going to actually, and this is what I've been actually telling you since the day one, that Five Eyes and their intelligence apparatus were the biggest fans of India, and they actually played a very crucial role in mainstreaming of India and Indian community in the US and the West. And now these are the people whose faith in India has been shaken. And they are therefore actually, if you look at Foreign Affairs magazine, which journal, which is thought to be the policy periodical of the US, and if you look at it, you will see that every other article, I mean, how often this happens, Sana, that Caravan magazine, which has been really ostracized in India, their chief editor actually writes an opinion piece for Foreign Affairs, and in which he actually builds the case what exactly is going on and why is it that Indian government is targeting Sikhs all over the world. Similarly, Kashmiris, similarly Muslims as well. Yeah. So all this is going to out, and it is going to actually create a lot of problem for New Delhi. Perhaps we should also be appealing to the better nature of Narendra Modi. He wants to be a statesman. So perhaps he can start by showing some kind of vision in Kashmir, particularly, especially recently we saw that when it came to Indian Supreme Court, there the government actually went and assured them that A, statehood will be shortly resumed, B, there will be elections also there. So I'm hoping that there is going to be some kind of stepping back from their silly attempt of 4 years ago. If that happens, the future of Kashmir has to be resolved by interaction between Indian leaders and Pakistani leaders.
Right, absolutely. Dr. Ishtiaq, I also want to take your perspective on the issue of Gaza and Palestine and Pakistan's stance on it, particularly how it was also raised with the UN Secretary General. And we know that despite a lot of international protests across the world, we still haven't really had calls for ceasefire by important leadership, including the US as well. And so this is something that, of course, is a concern in terms of the genocide that is going on in Gaza. What do you think of Pakistan's stance so far and this issue being raised with the UN Secretary General?
Well, Pakistan is also contributing to humanitarian assistance for the Palestinians caught up with this Israeli war in Gaza. And Pakistan obviously historically has always championed the cause of Palestine. In fact, soon after the Balfour Declaration of 1917, the All India Muslim League leadership under Jinnah's leadership always projected the Palestinian cause, and this theme has continued ever since. But more importantly, I think in the current context, obviously, the stance of the Muslim world, including Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and other countries, is one. It is simply an issue of Israeli aggression and Palestinian suffering. And I think unless and until a separate Palestinian state is created on the basis of various frameworks which have been awarded, especially the Arab Peace Initiative of 2002, which was endorsed by the Arab League, we will continue to see this tragedy unfolding before our eyes. And I think currently, from the security perspective, one of the dangers of the continuity of Israeli aggression and the consequent suffering of the Palestinians, is that the religious extremist forces within the world of Islam and among the Muslim immigrant communities in the West, they will, get encouraged. And if
Right.
extremism spreads on the basis of a legitimate cause in the facing the Muslims of the world, then obviously it will lead to further spread of regional and international terrorism. And I think that is one point uh, regarding the consequences of what happens in the occupied territories,
Okay.
broader consequence for in terms of the spread of extremism and terrorism is one point that our civil and military leadership should continue to highlight in their interactions with the world leadership.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Ishtiaq Ahmed, for joining us and being a part of the debate. We'll now move on to our next segment, which takes a look at the political dynamics of the country in light of the upcoming general elections. And Faisal, of course, there have been a lot of developments with regards to what is happening. Different political parties are saying one thing or the other, and different alliances are being formed. And every now and then we also keep on hearing reports or measures which point towards a possible delay. Do you think that despite everything that is being said, the fact that we have an election schedule, we have a date earlier, there was a lot of discussion that we don't have a date. We have everything in place to assure us, and we also have these measures being reiterated by the current leadership, both civil and military, saying that this is what is happening in the country. Do you think that despite all of this, there is still any doubt left that elections will not be held on 8th of February?
There is no doubt that on 8th of February next year, of course, the elections are going to take place. There is a schedule now that will be followed by the political parties. If they don't follow, of course, their candidates won't be appearing in the elections, and they would not be having any reason to complain about it. Of course, that is the date when elections are going to take place. When it comes to different political parties having different stance on it, for certain reason and whatsoever reason they have, they will be, of course, chanting about it, and that should be considered as a slogan in the election campaigns, nothing more than that. I mean, every party is trying to portray as if they are the victim. It is not the case. It is the election and the current interim setup. The only, obviously, the job they have to do is to, have the election, and the 8th of February is going to be the election day, and all of the political parties, they must go for it rather than, knocking around on the mere excuses for just, getting away with it. I think they just need to go for the elections, and that's it.
Right. Farrukh, there is, of course, a concern that is being raised against the Chief Election Commissioner these days. And there is talk about how, under his leadership, there cannot be free and fair elections. And a lot of legal organizations, including the Pakistan Bar Council, have talked about this and cited reasons, including those of delimitations and allotting different seats in the National Assembly in his hometown, which, of course, have been denied by him. But there is this perception now that is being created that the CEC will not be holding free and fair elections. What do you think about that?
All right, Sana, I want to meet all the heads of all these legal bodies, and I want to take their autograph, because they are not seeing something so obvious that one has to actually really gawk at that. And that is that Chief Election Commissioner is only one among the equals. There are other members in the Election Commission, 4 of them actually, right? And every decision that has to be taken cannot be taken by CEC alone. It has to be essentially empowered by the other members. So what are you telling me? The 2 lawyers, 1 former judge and 1 bureaucrat, all are in some kind of game. I mean, if you want to actually malign somebody, you can always do it, because there's so much polarization, there's so much confusion in the system, especially because you actually got a very whiny party. You displaced it, and it is so noisy that it always keeps on adding to your automatic negative thoughts. So you can always bank on that. But honestly, in my considered opinion, I think that one man has, and by the way, why is it that we keep on doubting people, but we don't praise the people who have actually shown some mettle? For example, Chief Justice of Pakistan essentially has proven that it is because of him that we are going to hold the elections on February 8th, despite the fact that it was a date that came from the president who was elected by the PTI government when it was in power. So honestly, I don't think that there is any point in continuing to criticize. And by the way, again, the same people, if they are asking the Chief Election Commissioner to resign, that is their choice. But otherwise, impeaching him is going to take longer than the elections themselves. So why would you actually attempt something like this now, this late in the game, when only months are remaining? And regarding elections being held in time, as you were asking Faisal, I think that except for perhaps Maulana Fazlur Rahman, who has actually categorically demanded or suggested something similar, I haven't seen anybody. The only party that could have practically raised a concern, and that is PTI, and it keeps on doing that as well. But on the other side, it has also, by replacing its chairman, has also shown that it is ready to play the ball, right? So I think that till the time that is happening, elections are going to take place in time, and the only thing that unknown that could have happened, and I don't know the future, I don't have a crystal ball, I'm not a seer, is possibility of a martial law. But that I don't think I don't think anybody is even echoing that.
Yeah.
So I don't see there's any problem at all.
All right. Thank you, Farrukh, and thank you, Faisal, for joining us. And we hope, of course, that is the case and no more trouble is caused and we see the elections on the date as planned. But we'll be here to talk more about it if or if not any change happens. And that's all that we have from the debate today. We'll now see you tomorrow.